Fairmont Crest, real tragedies rarely begin with blood. They begin with a glance avoided for too long, a sentence swallowed back down the throat, a resignation letter placed on the table at the exact moment when every secret has become too heavy for one person to keep carrying. In the latest stretch of the story, Tomas has made the decision to leave Bill's law firm. Lynette continues raising the level of threat against Haley with a new blackmail demand. Kat refuses to stop throwing herself into the gray areas surrounding Lynette, and Randy is being pushed into an increasingly suffocating position. Those movements are exactly what make this storyline feel like more than a chain of scattered conflicts now. It is tightening into a spiral where one slip from a single person could send everyone crashing down. If you look closely, Haley's fear was never simply the fear of having an ordinary secret exposed. What truly terrifies her is that Tomas is not like other people. He is not loud, not theatrical, not foolish enough to rush into confrontation before he is sure of what he has. Yet that very calmness is what makes him the most dangerous kind of threat to someone like Haley. People who survive through manipulation are rarely afraid of open rage. What they fear is someone patient enough to fit every piece of the truth together until the full picture finally appears. The deeper Tomas digs into Lynette, the more Haley feels the shell she worked so hard to build thinning by the day. And when someone who has lived too long by controlling everything realizes that control is about to slip away, the first instinct is almost always to strike first, not out of strength, but out of desperation. That is why the heart of this storyline is not simply the question of who hates whom or who wants to destroy whom. The real question is who understands the price of the truth most clearly. Haley does. She understands far too well that if Tomas traces Lynette, he will not stop at a name or a false trail. He will keep going to the motive, to the money, to the phone calls, to the holes in people's stories, even to the buried stretches of time Haley thought she had successfully hidden forever. That is exactly why Tomas handing in his resignation does not make her feel safer. It makes him more frightening. As long as he remained inside Bill's firm, Tomas was still part of the system, still bound by a title, by rules, by watchful eyes. But the moment he walks away, he is no longer a piece on that board. He becomes a free variable, a man with nothing left to lose professionally within that old orbit, and that is the moment when people with secrets have the most reason to tremble. There is a fascinating paradox here. On a logical level, Haley should want Tomas out of the firm as quickly as possible so she can remove the thorn. But psychologically, she cannot truly relax once he steps outside. That creates a dark internal tension. If Tomas stays, the risk of him digging deeper remains. If he leaves, the risk of him overturning the whole game from the outside becomes even more dangerous. A person like Haley, once pushed into a state where no safe choice remains, is highly likely to start thinking in extremes. That is the point where fear hardens into malice. Not the kind of malice that erupts in one reckless moment, but the kind disguised as logic, justified as something necessary for survival. The more she tells herself she is only protecting herself, the easier it becomes for her to cross a line she once believed was far too distant. If Haley truly begins to think that Tomas needs to disappear, she is unlikely to do it alone. Not because she lacks nerve, but because this kind of crime requires more than one pair of hands. It requires someone with motive, someone with means, and most importantly, people who are trapped deeply enough that they can no longer turn back. Randy and Lynette therefore become the perfect links in a dark alliance with no exit. Randy is the kind of man who gets dragged into Forbidden's territory not because he is naturally vicious, but because his weakness is more dangerous than outright cruelty. People like Randy do not begin by wanting someone dead. They begin by hiding one small thing, telling one lie for someone else, showing up in the wrong place at the wrong time, and then each moral retreat drags them deeper. By the time they realize they have become accomplices, they are no longer standing at the edge of the cliff. They have been in the middle of the fall for a long time. Randy's tragedy lies in the fact that he may still see himself as a man cornered by circumstance, even though it was his repeated silence that opened the door for the disaster to enter. Lynette is different. If Randy is the link forged from cowardice, Lynette is the link forged from cold survival instinct. At first, she may have appeared to be a victim, a woman trapped by circumstance, used by others, swept into someone else's game. But the further this story goes, the harder it becomes to believe Lynette is merely a woman driven to the wall. Someone who truly only wants to survive looks for a way to run. Someone who starts bargaining, starts raising the price, starts turning secrets into weapons, is no longer simply a victim. What makes Lynette frightening is not merely what she knows, but the fact that she understands the value of what she knows and is willing to sell it to whichever side pays more. This kind of character is always the perfect spark for any tragic explosion, because they are loyal to no one but themselves. If one fateful night does happen, Lynette could easily be the one who provides the location, arranges the meeting, opens the first door, and then slips back into the shadows so that others believe they were the ones who truly acted. That is exactly why the theory of the glass room feels more chilling than any ordinary crime scene. The glass room is not simply beautiful as a visual setting. It is the perfect symbol for this entire storyline. It is transparent, and yet no one truly sees everything happening inside it. It is elegant, quiet, almost harmless on the surface, which makes it the ideal place to hide a carefully orchestrated act of violence. If TOMAS appears there on a fateful night, it is hard to believe that would be mere coincidence. A man standing at a professional crossroads while being pressured from every side does not naturally walk into such a secluded place at a time when every relationship around him is stretched tight as wire. Unless something draws him there. It could be a message promising the truth about Lynette. It could be a private meeting TOMAS arranges himself because he believes he is finally close to the last missing link. But it could also be, and this is the most terrifying possibility of all, that he goes there because he believes someone is finally ready to tell the truth. When in reality he is walking straight into a trap built specifically for him. From an analytical perspective, if a major incident strikes immediately after TOMAS steps out of Bill's orbit, the timing would be suspiciously perfect. An accident after a resignation could easily be interpreted as the collapse of a man under professional pressure, the consequence of personal conflict, or a chain of unfortunate coincidences. That is exactly why it would be an almost ideal scenario for the killer if the goal were to erase every line leading back to the true motive. A death that happens just as the victim exits an old structure naturally diffuses suspicion, because people are always more willing to believe in chaos than conspiracy. And Fairmont Crest, with all its glittering luxury, is especially skilled at turning conspiracy into something that merely looks like chaos. But if TOMAS were truly killed, the greatest shock would not only lie in the death itself. It would lie in the chain reaction that follows. Cod would become the emotional epicenter of that earthquake. What makes Cod so interesting is that she is not the kind of character who collapses and disappears into grief. Pain in her tends to work like a second blade, cutting through emotion until it reaches the coldest part of awareness. If TOMAS falls, Cod would absolutely grieve, rage, and carry guilt for perhaps seeing the danger too late to stop it. But that kind of pain is precisely what would make her more dangerous than anyone else to the people hiding in the dark. Because Cod would not only lose someone important, she would also lose whatever patience she still had for polished lies. Once her heart is torn open, her mind may become even sharper, even more ruthless. She would be the first to realize that no accident could be this perfect. No coincidence could land at the exact moment TOMAS was getting too close to a secret. And no one is innocent when too many people had reason to want him silent. This is where the storyline opens into its deepest layer. Who will betray whom before the truth comes out? Randy is the easiest to crack because fear inside him has no foundation. He may stay silent for a while, may convince himself that he only stood by and watched, But when death stands before him in its true shape, people like Randy rarely withstand its weight. They start slipping in what they say, stop sleeping, begin mistrusting their own allies, and start thinking about confessing not because conscience has suddenly grown stronger, but because their nerves have grown too weak. Randy could be the first link to snap, and the one who causes the entire alliance to collapse from within. Lynette represents a different kind of betrayal. If she turns on them, it will not be out of remorse, but out of instinct. She will watch, wait, see which side gains the advantage, then sell the last piece of truth in exchange for her own escape route. A character like Lynette is rarely loyal to any conspiracy until the end because she believes the final survivor is not the best person or the strongest person, but the one who knows when to run. That makes her the most dangerous ally Haley could possibly have. Haley may think she controls Lynette with money, with threats, with shared secrets, but those bonds only last until the moment Lynette sees a better opportunity on the other side. If Cott presses hard enough, if Joey or Bill begins touching the right nerve, Lynette could easily become the one who hands over the final key, not so justice can win, but so she can save herself. As for Haley, if she truly reaches the point of no return, she will be the first to betray everyone else, including those who dirtied their hands beside her. That is a cruel logic, but one perfectly suited to someone who has long survived behind a mask designed for self-preservation. A person like Haley can cry, panic, and present herself as just another victim of circumstances beyond her control. But when she is driven into a corner, her final priority will still be keeping herself standing. Not Randy, not Lynette, not even Bill, only herself. And once that instinct takes over, every alliance becomes expendable. That is why, if the shell of lies begins to crack, Haley may be the first to drive the knife into an accomplice's back in exchange for a few more fragile hours of safety. Looking at the entire structure of the story, what makes it compelling is not only the possibility that Tomas becomes the victim of a carefully arranged death. It is the fact that every character is sliding into darkness by a different path. Tomas walks into that fateful night because he believes the truth is worth pursuing. Cott charges toward it because she believes pain must be answered with justice. Randy sinks because he lacks the courage to stop. Lynette slips across every line because survival has become a private morality of its own. And Haley turns the fear of being unmasked into the motive to do the most frightening thing of all. That is the structure of a powerful tragedy. No one stands where they stand by accident, and it is each person's private choices that make the wheel of fate spin faster. So if the night in the glass room truly happens, it will not be just a sensational shock twist. It will be the logical result of everything that has been building in silence, a resignation letter turning into a death sentence, a small secret becoming a war for survival, a blackmail scheme twisting into a noose around the throat of the one who began it, and the fear of exposure finally becoming a motive for murder. At that point, the greatest tragedy will not be how Tomas died, but how everyone left behind will go on living with the truth that they all saw the darkness drawing near long before it arrived. Yet each of them chose to believe there was still time to stop it. At Fairmont Crest, that is always the deadliest mistake of all. What do you think? If Tomas is really killed, will Cott collapse in grief, or will that very grief make her the first to see who is truly behind the scenes? When the facade of lies begins to crack, who will be the first to betray, Randy out of fear, Lynette out of survival instinct, or Haley out of a desperate desire to survive?